Catholics around the world in mourning over the death of Pope Francis. Pope Francis died of a stroke and subsequent heart failure, according to the Vatican, which released a statement. The statement also revealed that the pontiff had requested to be buried in a simple, unadorned tomb. The 88-year-old pope, revered by millions of Catholics around the world, died at 7:35 a.m. in his apartment at Casa Santa Marta on Monday. His cause of death was confirmed through an ECG test, according to the Vatican. Francis, who twice almost died when hospitalized with severe pneumonia in February, also suffered from multiple complications. The Pope confirmed in his will that he wished to be buried at the Santa Maria Maggiore Church in Rome's Esquilino neighborhood, breaking with long-standing Vatican tradition. He would pray at the Basilica before and after trips overseas, and last visited on the 12th of April. The text of his will specified that Francis wanted to be buried in the ground without particular decoration, but with the inscription of his papal name in Latin, Franciscus. Popes are usually buried with much fanfare in the grottos beneath St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, but Francis, loved by many Catholics for his humility, simplified rites for papal funerals last year. His body was transferred into a coffin in the chapel of Casa Santa Marta on Monday night. The coffin will be taken to St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday morning to allow the public to pay respects. Cardinals will meet on Tuesday morning to decide the date of the Pope's funeral, which must take place within 4 and 6 days after death. The funeral will be followed by 9 days of official mourning. Pope Francis was born in the Flores neighborhood of Buenos Aires. He became Pope Francis in 2013 after serving as Cardinal of Buenos Aires. The Holy Father was known for his progressive stance on issues such as same-sex relationships. He was outspoken on injustices such as the war in Ukraine. However, the silence of the Church on other issues such as the Palestinian war had drawn some criticism. A famous quote from Pope Francis: "Hostility, extremism, and violence are not born of a religious heart." He said they are betrayals of religion. He was speaking in 2021 in Iraq. Joining me now on the narrative is C Nigel Gravesande, the international relations analyst, registrar of the University of Guyana, and historian, and also a devout Catholic, to take a look at Pope Francis's life, his death, and the future of the Church under a new Pope. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you very much for having me share my thoughts and reflection for the first Jesuit Pope and the first from the Americas on his 12-year pontificacy.
Mm. And certainly, one of the things that his humility, I think, is what one of the things that defined his reign as head of the Catholic Church. Um, Even just the way he's willed that he should be laid to rest is even in death he continues on that part of humility, Nigel.
Absolutely, and it's important that during his entire papacy, we reminded that he did not use the papal palace. He was the Pope of the people.
He
He
didn't
had
use the
shed
Pope
all,
Mobile either.
that's right, and did shed all of the trappings. And it's important for us as we reflect on his life and his death and his legacy that he was, in fact, one with a particular mission, having been a Jesuit priest, taking the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, the first priest, Jesuit in the Jesuit community, to actually be elevated and elected as Pope. And he tried to live the vows. In fact, he took on the name upon being elected as Pope, St. Francis of Assisi, the founder of the Jesuit community. And during his 12 years as Pope, lived the tenets of St. Francis. And as we interrogate and reflect on his life, we will see those issues that he championed. And while the world community really, with tremendous reverence and appreciation, would reflect on his life. I also wanted to indicate that his was, in certainly the last couple of months, uh, a period of intense pain. We saw the longest hospitalization of his papacy for a couple of weeks in February and March. And so, not only the worldwide Catholic community of approximately 1.3 billion faithful will mourn his death, but we have started to see the expressions of great humility and admiration being uttered by world leaders. In the Caribbean, we have seen statements by the chairman of CARICOM, Honorable Mia Motley of Barbados, Prime Minister of
Mhm.
Barbados. We've seen Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell issue a statement, and the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Mohammed Irfan Ali, who is a Muslim, very devout Muslim, and it's important that in his message, he quite correctly pointed out that he was a champion of inter-religious dialogue and engagement, and for that will be tremendously remembered. Prime Minister Motley, as well as Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell, in their separate messages, spoke about his passion for the environment. And in fact, I recall in one of his encyclicals, an official letter of the Pope, characterize our planet as belonging to all of us and that which must be preserved. So he was, in fact, an extraordinary and decent human being while being head of the Catholic Church globally, but he also championed causes that will continue to be etched in the minds of both Catholics and non Catholics alike.
Do you think Pope Francis made a difference in international relations? He was very vocal on international issues as well, and big issues that were affecting the lives of people. What sort of impact do you think he has made on international relations in the world, and how people will be able to view the world going forward?
That's an important question. And in fact, in the last 5 years of his papacy, we saw him focusing on issues such as migration, the cause and plight of refugees, and he took on the establishment. And even in the current global dispensation, we have seen political and civic leaders treating with migration issues, but he indicated without any fear of being challenged that there had to be a sense of dignity, a sense of belonging, and a sense of love, and embraced them. And I believe that this may have been linked to his own personal experience. He was the son of Italian immigrants in Argentina and would have seen and lived through in those years in the early 1900s the plight of immigrants and felt that there should have been a welcoming arm of those who could do better. So that was one of the issues that he championed. The environment was another profound area that his legacy will reflect, and asked our leaders that we are all part of the process in preserving what God has given to us. At sometimes, his utterances and his pronouncements were diametrically opposed to some political and civic leaders, but he was strident in his pronouncements to ensure that that which God has given should be preserved not for some of mankind, but all of mankind. And he will always be remembered for his strident efforts of interfaith dialogue. He embraced the Muslims, he embraced the Hindus, the Jews, and reflected a position of tolerance. He got into some difficulties with the bureaucracy and the conservatives in the Catholic Church, but never allowed his mission of inclusivity to be known. His advocacy on world peace and the pronouncements he made against the invasion into Ukraine by Russia and the atrocities in Gaza echoed across the entire world because it was one that sought to ensure that peace dominated the elements of war. And it was framed for his love of the suffering of children and families that were devastated, dislocated, and killed by what he chose to describe as senseless wars and called for peace. I think we wouldn't forget, or we should not forget, that his humility was anchored in mercy and compassion. Compassion for those who were fleeing persecution across the globe, persons who were neglected in their own geographical locations, and touched the social conscience of political leaders globally on the need to address the issues facing the marginalization, social and economic marginalization of the most vulnerable. These are just about a few of the issues that he championed and spoke about that touched every single person that followed him. Of course, he had his detractors, both within and without the Catholic Church. Some felt that
certainly, Nigel, his stance and his position on the issue of same-sex relationships also was a bit off the well, off the reservation for the church, but he was, very much out there saying, looking at everyone as everyone is God's, a child of God and deserving of the same kind of treatment. And particularly on
that
the
was
issue of same sex, he drew some criticism there.
absolutely, and he was fearless in indicating, in addressing the issue of LGBT and same sex marriages by saying very simple, I do not subscribe to what he perceived was a sin, but that he had to love the sinner and could not have them marginalized or ostracized in a world and an environment that was bitter and not accommodating. And it was those pronouncements that really touched even some in the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. Some of his cardinals felt that that was not an issue for the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church to be addressing because it was not an important area of interrogation. But his calls for openness on matters of gender, sexuality, and the environment was seminal and would be a lasting legacy, in my opinion, of the papacy because many of his predecessors stayed clear of these issues because they perceived them to be controversial. And in fact, some of his detractors felt that he did not go as far as he should have. Some felt that he should have revisited the issue of the ordination of female to the priesthood. Um, that, I believe, he stayed clear of and just allowed the church and the Holy Spirit, in my respectful opinion, to guide those issues that were grounded in the conservative nature of the Catholic Church, which was established 2 years ago, um, when Peter was chosen um, by Jesus himself. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. That was Francis's mission, and he was fearless in articulating, even though he acknowledged that there would have been detractors, even from within his own congregation and
I
his own
wonder,
community.
I wonder why though, given how dynamic his papacy has been, why he did not pursue the issue of the ordination of women into the priesthood.
I can't second guess what may have been some of his prayerful reflection on this, but he must have thought, I suspect, that he was dealing with um, a history of centuries in which the ordination of men was, in fact, enshrined and powerful in the Catholic Church. The issue, is my respectful view, of the celibacy of the priesthood was something that he did not touch as well. Um, and I can understand that priests as shepherds, bishops as shepherds of the people, had to be devoted completely to God's people and ought not to have families in the context of marriage distract them from doing the will of the Father. And in fact, in one of his encyclicals early in his papacy, did indicate how he was very committed to the maintenance of that which Christ himself lived, and priests are called to live, and that is a celibate life. That has had its own challenges, and he frontally dealt with the abuse of sexual abuse of priests. Some felt that he should have gone much further. Um, and any successor has a platform, in my respectful view, to treat with those issues that his health and the emerging environment and understanding was not able, did not permit him to complete. And I'm prayerfully um, reflective that whoever is elected when the conclave of electors meet, that these are some of the issues that they will have to grapple with. And as I am touching the conclave of cardinals that will elect the new pope, it is instructive to note that during his papacy, Pope Francis would have appointed 110 of the cardinals that will be sitting in the conclave of about 139. And it is my reflectful view that those who were appointed by him would have shared similar visioning, the need for the transformation and evolution of the Catholic Church, on treating with some of the issues that Francis treated with. And it is my expectation that from among those to be elected will come a new pope that would largely see the need for continuity. Let us not forget that to be eligible to be part of the conclave with voting rights, you had to be under 80 years of age. So the 139 or so of them, to have 110 being appointed by him is very instructive, and should send a message to those of us who are speculating, or those who would wish to speculate whether the new pope should come from Asia or Africa. We did see a pope coming for the first time from our Americas, and anything is possible once the Spirit guides those who are going to be called upon to make that very important decision in a few days from now.
Because I've seen there's one African cardinal, I think he's 79 years old or so, um, who, but he was not on the same visionary path, on the same path as Pope Francis. I think he was in opposition to a lot of the positions that Pope Francis took. And then there's an Asian cardinal who is believed to be a contender as well, or a suitable candidate, meeting the criteria as well. And people are saying, well, the first, can we see the first black pope? Uh, has the church got there yet?
Well, I want to say that what I have been reading and analyzing coming from the global media
Mm,
is very speculative. And I want to indicate that that period of solitude and secrecy when they be praying and calling upon the Holy Spirit to guide their actions is what will ultimately determine who would be our new Pope. I am unworthy to even attempt to speculate and even to follow traditions. No one expected, I thought, a Jesuit was going to be appointed and elected as Pope, and Francis did, or coming from the Americas, because
mm.
the papacy has historically been grounded in a particular geographical location. And I have to be confident that that process will be guided by the Spirit, and that anything and the will of the Father in heaven will emerge. And therefore, I'm unworthy as an analyst to speculate. The election of a pope is very different from the election of a political leader. There's no campaigning.
You
The
can't compare, and it's
outpouring
a deeply
of
spiritual
the Holy
thing. You
Spirit. That's right. That's right. And it's very different. And we have to be very careful of bringing an intellectual um, analysis and interpretation into a process that is essentially spiritual, calling on the Holy Spirit of some men who have been determined to make that choice.
let's take a look a little bit at the process, though. Uh, After Pope Francis's funeral, which has to be within a specific period, I think it's like five or 6 days or so, Nigel.
Well, the date has been identified from a statement coming out of the Vatican. His body and funeral will take place on Saturday, the 26th of April at 10 a.m. At that time, it will give an opportunity for all of the cardinals to journey to the Vatican. There are six of them, my understanding, already there. And they held today, actually, earlier this morning, what is called the General Congregation of the College of Cardinals. That took place, and that was the historical beginning of a period of prayer, a period of reflection, and a period of preparation for his his ultimate burial. It is my understanding that as the other cardinals arrive, there's going to be another general congregation of the College of Cardinals tomorrow at some time, in which the preparation would be intensified. Then there's a period after the funeral where the cardinals who are eligible to be part of the conclave to elect a new pope will reflect prayerfully on their role, adhere to the cardinal rules and the protocols, and they will be called upon to sign an oath of secrecy, ensuring that there is no contact with the outside world until the Pope is finally elected. There's usually a ballot, and you must meet that magical number of 2/3%. If you haven't at a particular ballot, then you'll see black smokes coming from the chimney, And they will continue that process in prayer and reflection until white smoke emerges from the chimney. The cardinal exits the balcony to the waiting crowd and announces, "We have a
Have
new
a
pope."
pope.
And there is celebration. So that's the process. Um, Francis's election was relatively short, but we have had elections of popes that took weeks. So it's generally, as I said, guided by the Holy Spirit. There is no rush. There is no timeline, and we should spend the next couple of days in prayerful reflection for the repose of his soul, and ask God's guidance for the cardinals that would be called upon to make that very important decision, guided by the Holy Spirit, of the election of the successor of Peter and Francis, immediately as the spiritual leader of the 1.3 billion Catholics around the world.
Do you believe, Nigel, before I let you run off, do you believe that there will be any sort of impact on, well, what sort of impact do you think the passing of Pope Francis, given the dynamic Pope that he was, on the faithful of the Catholic Church, that 1.5 billion people, the church itself? How do you see anything changing with the absence of Francis? We're getting a new Pope, we're getting a new Bishop of Rome, but Francis was special. How do we
Very
move
special.
forward from Francis?
Well, there are three things I think his successor has a platform to expand and to allow grow. One, he was a model, a shepherd of compassion and conscience. And that should be accelerated in the context of an environment where we are treating with a plethora of global challenges and conflicts on the economic front, on the front of social justice, on the front of wars. That legacy needs to continue and intensify. I think we also have in a new pope the opportunity to continue leading through a process that demonstrates humility. We have to see the spiritual leader continue to be a man of the people, a man that will touch and that will look out for the dispossessed, the despised, the lonely, the weak, the vulnerable. That's the voice the Catholic community expects. Certainly in the Diocese of Georgetown in Grenada will continue. And I've seen some of these expressions of hope being articulated within the last 48 hours here in our own diocese. Um, I hope that the conversation that started on climate change and the environment and the planet as our common home, which Francis clearly articulated, would be on the agenda of any successor. So these are a few of the issues that I believe would need to be addressed and continue. And of course, the Reformation, which has started in the Catholic Church itself. Let us not forget that he has initiated a conversation in the church to look at itself and to prayerfully come up with a direction that the church needs to move spiritually so that it can grow. And it's interesting, at the time of his death, what we have been seeing on Holy Saturday was significant increases into the Catholic faith. The numbers in North America and Africa and Asia on Holy Saturday night grew exponentially. It means that his mission has resonated in other parts of the world.
Nigel, I want to thank you so much for joining me on The Narrative to take a look at the life and the legacy of Pope Francis of the Catholic Church. Thank you so much for joining me. C Nigel Gravesande.
Thank you very much.
This is The Narrative. I'm your storyteller, Callistra Fario, speaking there with Nigel Gravesande, international relations analyst and also a devout Catholic and registrar of the University of Guyana. We were taking a look at the life and the legacy of Pope Francis, who died 2 days ago. Pope Francis will be laid to rest on Saturday. More when we come back.